Hi, welcome this morning on Monday morning to the Cannabis Minority Report podcast here at NCIA. Really stoked for this conversation today. If our little time in the green room backstage just getting started was any indication of what we're going to have in store for you guys today, it's going to be a real fun conversation. I already knew this coming into today because Michael Webster is, for those of you who don't know him, one of the most dynamic speakers and really interesting people that I've found in the industry so far. Really looking forward to the conversation today. So before we get into that, of course, we're going to get into the news because that's one of the things we do here today, do here on the podcast, is we give our take on the news, right? So we'll talk about some of the highlights and headlines that we see out there, and we'll go ahead and headline profile some businesses that we want to go ahead and profile because that's news too. Just because it isn't in the major headlines of the news doesn't mean it isn't news. It's what's going on. It's what's happening. It's what's going on in our industry. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the news right now and get rolling. Oh, I should mention real quickly here that we are on LinkedIn Live. So for those of you listening to the podcast later, recognize that you can check out our live recordings on LinkedIn Live. But if you're not checking out the recordings, make sure you do subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. And probably should do that anyway, just so you get the reminders in case you step out of LinkedIn Live for a little bit. So that said, so the news, let's see, we're going to actually start with some NCIA announcements. And then I'm going to introduce, actually, I'll just introduce him right now real briefly. I'm going to give a proper introduction in a little bit. But Michael Webster here is the founder and managing member of Fallen Leaves Évents. He's also a new member of NCIA's Banking and Financial Services Committee. And he's also the host of the Power Hour, which is our call that we do at NCIA for our social equity members. And Michael, I'm welcome to the show. We're going to get to you in just a minute here with a proper conversation, but we want to introduce you now so that you can chime in on the news, because I know you're going to have some things to say about some of this stuff here. So without further ado, let's get rolling.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. You and Vince and your amazing audience. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Always look forward to tapping in with you, and whatever the topic is, I'm always motivated to sit down with you. So awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Motivational Mondays, right?
Yes, sir.
Hashtag Motivational Mondays. I'm starting to get used to all this hashtag type stuff now, right? All right, cool. So, all right, a few things here to announce from the NCAA side of things. Hopefully, we'll get to see Michael Webster out in Detroit, actually, around May 9th. We do have our industry social out there May 9th. I'm looking right now at doing a workshop for our social equity members and, linking up with the equity community out there really in general. They don't have to necessarily just be members of our association. But around May 9th, we're also looking to do Chicago a few days prior to that. And a week or two earlier than that, at the end of April, we will be in New York for our industry social on April 27th. And so I'm looking to do some kind of workshop at that as well. On that note, if you are in those areas and you're interested in being partnered or sponsored with us in that capacity, please reach out. Always looking for people to collaborate with, and we definitely could use the sponsorship to make sure that these events happen. Couple other things to note here on the NCAA side of things. First two Catalyst conversations of the year went very well last week. So the Catalyst conversations, for those of you that don't know, those are our webinar series designed specifically in our DEI program. We work collaboratively with our equity members as well as partners in the community. So last week we had, I think, one of the most important conversations that we're going to see a lot more of as we move forward, but really cracking the code of how to do good and well, right? So many times we talk about doing good or doing well. And I'm just honestly just getting sick of this, to be quite frank, in our society, not just in cannabis, but we need to learn how to do good and well. B corporations are pounding down the door and doing this kind of stuff, Ben and Jerry's and Patagonia and companies like that. Cannabis industry, this is our chance to create a new paradigm. And so we need to start learning how to do good and doing well. Organizations like Cannabis Doing Good are showing us some of the ways to do this. Our organization at the NCI, I think we're starting to learn how to do this really well too. And we want to be an industry standard setter. So Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition joined us for that conversation, the Catalyst conversation, because they have cracked the code out there in Illinois. Gary Little, really amazing work that he's doing with Doug Kelly and Peter Contos out there. And, just definitely check out that webinar. It was a really great webinar. We'll have the recording up soon. Another one that we had last week was what's hot in 2023. And those conversations, it's interesting because we do talk about the specific opportunities coming up, but I think more importantly, it's how to access and assess these different opportunities. And that's what is something that all of us can use at any time, but especially if you're new to the industry, you definitely want to check out that webinar. So a couple of those announcements. And then let's see what else here. I made some notes. we're going to skip over that right now, but let's get into the news. So the news, I got a few different stories here today I want to run with. The first thing is that and this is from Beard Brothers. Check this out in Beard Brothers, the progress in Kansas and Arkansas. So Arkansas is looking to expand. And the quote that I have here is that some tax revenue would be set aside for a yearly stipend for law enforcement officers. Tax revenue would also be directed to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences and drug court programs and the state's general revenue. So the thing I want to say about this real quick is, and I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers here, and I'm definitely not trying to ruffle the feathers of, our law enforcement, officers and individuals out there. But something that does bother me is seeing, as we legalize cannabis, that we're constantly seeing these carve outs of the tax dollars going directly towards more, policing, basically. I know that there's, those departments and those offices, they have other ways and other methods of coming up with their budgets, as they have for many decades. I'd like to see more intentionality put towards other programs that could be more restorative, so to speak, and more building. And doing away with the harm of the war on drugs, not just continuing to fund police officers and those and like I said, we need to fund those departments, okay. But I think there's a lot of other avenues that we've seen that do work because they've been funded for centuries. So on that note, Arkansas, we'll see what happens, but Arkansas is looking to expand their medical program and into adult use. Kansas, I thought, is interesting. In the legislative session in 2022, there were many efforts, and in spite of 68% of local voters actually in favor of medical marijuana, they still haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. So Governor Laura Kelly offered her signature on overdue legislation legalizing medical cannabis. However, she is allegedly waiting for the documentation to arrive. So we'll see what happens in Kansas. We'll see what happens in Arkansas. The reason this is important to note for those of you in other states that maybe don't care as much about those states is because as those states come online and as those states' senators and congresspeople also realize that their constituents are interested in seeing the legalization happen, it means that there's a lot more interest at the federal level. And as it happens at the federal level, we need to be involved, and we need to understand that we need to be civically engaged, so to speak, in how this gets rolled out. Otherwise, they're going to roll it out the ways that we don't necessarily want them to roll it out. It's going to be a lot of a mess, as we've seen in a lot of the other states that's happened already. But anyway, so just, be more civically engaged that way. And our second story that I want to run with today, and this, Michael, I definitely, I think that you might have some things to say, especially as this story unfolds. So a few different stories that I was reading about over the last few weeks that have kind of started to coalesce for me. The first story is that and this is from MJ Biz Daily, Flow Cannabis Company, the California, and this is, some of you may know them as Flow Canna. That's the brand that often was on the shelf. But Flow Cannabis Company, the California operator that raised nearly $200 million in a bid to become the Whole Foods of cannabis, has eliminated all plant-touching activities and mothballed operations after running out of cash, according to company documents and a board member. And, the reason I want to bring this up is a few different reasons. One, aside from the fact that they burned through more than $24 million in cash in 2021 in order to sell only $11 million worth of cannabis on the retail side of things, it's that we're constantly told, especially in the equity and the minority space, that it's too risky of a business option. The business plan isn't really there. Where's your traction? So on and so forth. And meanwhile, we still see companies like Flow Canna raising $200 million to go out there and fall flat because they also were overly projecting things, didn't really have a great business model. But I'm going to add a little more commentary here. I had personal experience with them several years back. And I'm not surprised to see this actually happening this way. I mean, there were some quotes in this article talking about how there was a lot of failed promises, a lot of missed promises of what they promised the farmers up north, that they were going to unify everybody and provide this great way to bring the craft sun-grown cannabis from up north down to the cities and the urban areas in the rest of California and provide this great platform. But when I reached out to them, years ago, this is when they were still getting started. It was one of the most disrespectful meetings I've ever sat in on my life, to be quite frank. And that's saying a lot. It's why I still remember it. The products that I would see on the shelf were not up to par, and that's just anecdotal evidence. But the thing is that it was really one of the most disrespectful meetings I've ever had in my life. And it wasn't because I take things overly sensitive. It wasn't because I did something wrong or something first. It was because I sat down with the person who really basically sat there taking notes to, I think, steal my ideas, is what it came down to, pretty much. never looked me in the eye, and really said a lot of things that were really derogatory, and then never followed up with me. So, look, I get that that was just one day, one experience, but I've heard a lot of other things that were along similar lines. And what I'm really sick of, and what I really want to see more of now, is people understanding that just because somebody comes in from the tech industry or has done something in some other industry doesn't mean that they're going to be successful in cannabis. And just because somebody in cannabis doesn't have, especially from the legacy space, maybe doesn't have certain, accolades in their business resume, doesn't mean that they can't be successful. And we're starting to see a little more in that, a little bit more in that, a little bit more in that. And I want to see more of that now. And I want to see more, funding opening up for folks that understand this industry, understand the customers in the industry, understand the suppliers in the industry, and aren't just trying to come in with their nice, tech-based whatever it was that Flocana came in with from the tech industry, coming in and acting like they were going to go ahead and solve all of our problems, so to speak. So, not trying to be too pointed with this, but I guess I am trying to be too pointed with this because I think it is a really important point. So, Mike, I know you might not be too familiar with Flocana, but you've seen kind of how this stuff works as far as who gets funding, who doesn't get funding, especially being part of the Blanket Financial Service Committee. You have any commentary on this story before we switch gears?
Sure. I mean, before that, if you would indulge me, I would just quickly like to circle back to the Arkansas law enforcement dynamic.
Sure, absolutely.
And look at it through the historic lens of confiscation. Confiscation of personal property was a key tenet of the war on drugs. There are plenty of people who are sitting down now, incarcerated for cannabis, but also whose grandmothers lost their homes. I mean, it's not the West Bank with the IDF bulldozing, homes of suicide bombers or, Mars, whatever side of the fence you're on. But it's akin to it. It is addition by subtraction. It's okay, we'll greenlight cannabis, which should have been greenlit a long time ago, but here's the pound of flesh we want. And to divert tax revenue to law enforcement is, and again, I'm no enemy of law enforcement. If somebody ran up in here right now, I'm calling 911. I get it, but we can, this is America. We can love it and be critical at the same time. And law enforcement, by and large, is overfunded, over militarized. Communities are over policed. So the idea that that's a prudent step forward in standing up even a medical market to divert those funds should be diverted to the victims of the war on drugs, plain and simple. So I just couldn't gloss over that. I had to, take a look. If you're not aware, take a look of the historic confiscation laws. And though the power to make those determinations rest at the municipal level. So you got Boss Hogg and Sheriff Roscoe deciding who loses their home because somebody had a joint in their car. So totally absurd. But fast forwarding to, I am not terribly familiar with Flow, but like you said, you can strip away the names and just label it entity A, entity B. There is money out here. How do I know that? Because this economy prints money. Whenever there's a need for money, whenever there's a police action, because they don't like to call them wars anymore. They're police actions now. They're military police actions, international. They find the money. When they want to bail this sector of the economy out, when they want to bail this other sector, they find the money. They print money. When we left the gold standard, we all know that. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. When we left the gold standard, it's just paper now, and they can print as much. So the idea that money is not available is ridiculous. It's absurd. And those of us who have been particularly on the bottom rung, the social equity rung, who were promised as soon as licensure happened that we would, these good-natured investors would float down from the heavens and sign checks and wrap their arms around us. Nothing could have been further from the truth. What waited for me on the other side of licensure was the sharks. And when I got through the sharks, then there were the rats and the snakes. And that's currently where I am trying to navigate that terrain. just ridiculous, Mike. The idea that there's no money. And I hear it from everyone from the top of the supply chain to the bottom. There's no money. Because I'm talking to sponsors, I'm talking to other members of the supply chain, I'm talking to attorneys, I'm talking to family office attorneys who are, that's their one goal, is to represent this old money that is now starting to trickle into cannabis. And there's money. So the idea that, someone like Flo Canna could get and burn through that much money when I'm out here trying to find two nickels to rub together to keep my plane in the air
That's crazy.
Is insulting, and it's
insulting.
It's bad, and it's bad business. If you don't build out the bottom rung of any industry, the bedrock, then it's a faulty foundation. So you're right. Too many people coming into cannabis without cannabis backgrounds, coming from restaurant money, hospitality, these other sectors, athletes. Yep, I'm talking to you, athletes, superstar athletes, celebrities, dumping your money in, not doing anything for the community, doing it all the wrong way. It is no surprise that we're seeing them flop. So, I'll get off my soapbox too, but
look, you want to come in from another industry, great. I mean, so many people in cannabis have come in from other places, sure, and they're awesome people. I mean, but the difference is that they're listening. They understand that they don't know what they don't know. Imagine if you took that $200 million and went to, say, 100 farms, small farms up in California, 100 of those small craft farms that came underneath that umbrella that had their promises not met, and distributed $2 million to each of those farms, but also provided the technical assistance that's needed to make sure that they do things compliantly and know how to do their taxes in the right way, and so on and so forth. I would have loved to see where that money would have gone, but no, that's not available. We can't raise that kind of money. It's not, these people aren't reliable. That's all the things we hear, right? They don't know what they're doing in business. And yet we go ahead and burn through 200 million. And that's just one example. I know I'm picking on Flo Canna right now, but the reality is that there's a lot of companies in cannabis that have been bad players that didn't really know what they were doing, that had a lot of hubris and have lost a lot of money. And then now it's made it almost impossible for the smaller businesses to go get any money. I think investment is down about 95% this year. And that's because 95% was all going to these bigger companies and these bigger raises, but there still isn't money for the little guy. So anyway, let's shift gears here, because we could probably go on this for the whole entire talk we have. But before we get into the conversation, because I got some questions for you that I definitely want to raise, for you specifically. I do want to highlight some companies here. It's the end of Black History Month, and all month long we've been highlighting some Black-owned businesses. Which, just to be clear here, Black History Month is 1 month, but the reality is that we need to be highlighting these businesses all year long, and so we will be doing that all year long. But we made a focused effort to make sure that that's what we focus on this month. When we get to, Latino Heritage Month, or I don't remember when Asian something or other month is, but we'll figure that one out too. I didn't know about that one growing up, and somebody told me recently, said, oh, you should do something for Asian Heritage Month. I didn't know it existed, so I found out recently. It's sometime in the spring, I want to say, maybe May or June.
Asian Island Pacific. Trying to smash a bunch of folks from
Vince
Mongolia all the way down to the South Pacific into one box.
Right. It's like how many billion of us over there, right?
That's why you got to be applauded for the global majority effort, Mike. It's so important.
Global majority, exactly. We're all here in this together, and all year long, it's all of our years, and that includes all of the so-called allies and everything that we work with. That global majority means you're part of the majority. You're part of what we want to be moving forward. And most people, I believe, in the world want a better world. Most people in the world do not want a lot of the bullshit that we do see, and the fighting and the infighting and so on and so forth. So again, I'll get off that soapbox right now. But so the companies I want to highlight right here. So just as a recap, we've mentioned Queen Mary, SF Roots, Dose of Saucy, Landrace Origins, and Farmer Don. Those are all part of a Black in Business box that has been put together in California. Those companies are collaborating in California to promote each other's brands. We also mentioned Coixium, because Coixium was actually on here last week. Rebecca Collette, the CEO, doing amazing things out there in Michigan. Again, not only just simply for their own company, but for a lot of other companies, and for the cause, so to speak, the movement. Fallen Leaves, we've mentioned you on here, Michael. You and your dinners. We're going to talk about your dinner, your Sunday dinner that happened last night in just a minute. I'm a big foodie, so I'm looking forward to hearing about what you got going on. Herb and Planning Associates. Dr. Mila Marshall was on here a couple weeks ago, and what they're doing with sustainability and urban sustainability and ecosystem building and so on and so forth. That's really an amazing thing, and something that's often left out. And we had a great conversation. Go check out that episode if you get a chance. Chicago News Weekly. Dr. Mila Marshall mentioned Chicago News Weekly, which she writes a column for, edits a column, Cannabis Corner. So every week they tell a different story in cannabis, specifically by a Black-owned news outlet in the city of Chicago. Next Level Edibles. We mentioned Anthony Jenkins and
my man,
what he's doing out in California. Several years. He's been, took him several years to get that license. He got that license a couple of years ago now, and he's been moving forward and moving upwards. Just amazing guy and amazing products and amazing mission. And then the last one here that we did have highlighted so far is Urban Flavors. Urban Flavors, and a great team at Urban Flavors. We got a lot of those folks have now started to get much more engaged on the NCA side of things. So personally, I like to see that happening. But aside from that, it's a great company that understands what true equity and true social equity looks like. These are folks that, they come from the neighborhood and understand like what it takes to make sure that these resources get put back into the neighborhood properly, and that it's not just done as some afterthought. So a couple other companies I definitely want to mention here today. Purple Reina. Some news from Purple Reina is that you can now, she's now available at Berkeley Bowl. And Berkeley Bowl, for those of you that don't know, in Northern California, in the Bay Area, it's been an institution for many years for like healthy, natural foods, really vibrant market in the East Bay. So that was really awesome to hear that. And Reina is actually the lead author on our roundtable, our New York Social Equity Roundtable's most recent set of public comments. So Reina, really touches a lot of different areas of the industry, and it's great to see that happening out here in California.
Amazing human being.
Right?
Reina, amazing
exactly.
human being.
If you don't know Reina yet, you want to know Reina. We'll have to get her on the show here at some point in time. Vince Chandler, our producer, ReinaIsTheBomb.com, 100%.
Indeed.
Another couple to mention here: Illinois Equity Staffing, Shawnee Williams and Lynette Johnson out there in Illinois, doing amazing work as far as in the staffing, HR, employment agency side of things, job placement, training, payroll, accounting, the whole deal, right? Shawnee is another leader that we love seeing and supporting in any way possible. Canoline, Chris Johnson and Kenny Cottrell out there in Nevada. They've been holding it down for several years. Chris Johnson started that company several years ago in Nevada. They just have amazing syrups and beverages, and again, leaders in the space. The guy is a true mad scientist, wizard type of a person that has a huge heart. So Canoline. And then NACAT Pros, National Association of Cannabis and Accounting Tax Pros. Naomi Granger, who's the vice chair of our Banking and Financial Services Committee, with you, Michael, on that committee. Naomi has been a leader in the space for a long time. Another Black-owned business that has just done great work as far as really elevating the level of education and cohesion within the accounting and tax space, which is, for those of you that aren't aware, extremely important cannabis because of all of the regulations and rules that we have to kind of jump through, and hoops you have to jump through, 280E, of course, being chief among them possibly. And then one other group I wanted to mention, we're going to have a guest on here in a couple of weeks, Tiffany Watkins. She's the vice chair of our DEI committee, and she has a company called Vanguard Media. They are a cannabis lifestyle magazine that celebrates women and focuses on closing the gap between the sexes in the cannabis industry. And, she founded that, AKA Lady Canna is Tiffany Watkins' name. So the last thing I want to mention here is you can find a lot of this great information if you go to the Emerald Magazine. The Emerald Magazine has all these lists, the 100 plus, it's now 100 plus. When they started, it was like, the 100, and it was barely 100. 100 plus Black-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, Asian-owned businesses, right? So all these different, so-called categories. And it's not to say this is all we can buy from, but it's a great place to go and see who are your colleagues, who are your comrades, who are the people that, are paving the way, leading the way, and where's the intersectionality. So definitely go check out the Emerald Magazine and all their different 100 lists. I think they have an LGBTQ plus list as well. So, really, they've been doing this for a while, and it's not like pay to play. I believe that you just have to let them know that this business exists and it can be added pretty much. So they're really very democratic. It's not like you have to pay thousands of dollars to be on the list or anything like that. So with all that said, I know we kind of took a little bit to go over all the news bits today, but now it's time to get into this conversation with Michael Webster. I just want to say, look, real quick here, that there was, the Power Hour has been one of the main features of our DEI program at the NCIA. It's a place where our equity members plug in and kind of get to learn about, what the organization is, connect with each other, tap in. I moderated that for, I don't know, a good year plus before handing it off. And when I handed it off, Michael Webster is, is the person that we handed it off to. And it was on purpose, right? Michael had been in the room, had understood what the needs of the room were, and understood how to make sure that, everybody's voice in the room gets heard properly. And also, brings a unique perspective on things. So, Michael, welcome to the show today. Thanks for joining us. And, the first thing I want to ask you about, of course, is how was dinner last night? Like, tell us about that. Because for those of you who don't know out here, Michael Webster has an events company, has an events license out there in Michigan, and you guys do these gourmet dinners. I want to say it was, some rainbow river trout and some grass-fed short ribs and wild-caught mushrooms and things of that nature. Right? So tell us about dinner, man. How was dinner last night?
So first, I need to clarify that this was a private event, and the landscape right now, let's just say that the focus of the regulators, some of the focus of the regulators in Michigan has pivoted to the event space. Now, to their credit, they are one of the 3 municipalities that decided to license and regulate the consumption event space, along with California and Alaska. And I think that space, through the work that I'm doing and others, has shown that it's a viable space, and that they didn't button it up the way they wanted to. So now they're kind of sticking their beaks in our watering hole a little bit. So just got to be careful about the language we traffic in, particularly because it's an ecosystem. I do not exist. We are not able to operate without our, I won't call them sponsors, our partners, our corporate supporters, usually small, medium-sized brands, retailers, and don't want to get anybody in the crosshairs. But we're still working things out. Despite being the second largest market in the country, we are a $2 billion market behind California. We still have some maturing to do and some growing to do, particularly in these non-plant touching dynamics. So dinner was amazing. This was dinner number 4.
I'm like, come on, man, what'd you guys eat? Yeah.
This was dinner number 4 of the series. And if I can step onto my advocacy soapbox a little bit, I already did. We are here operating in the private event space because we were effectively chased from the licensed regulated space. And let me explain what I mean by that. So the regulators here created 3 licenses, which, at least not on paper, but the intention was to throw a bone to poor black and brown and poor white folks who made up the majority of the social equity applicants. So it was the consumption lounge license, the micro business license, and the consumption event license. None of these licenses are truly viable. There are creative ways of layering them, and injecting some creativity in execution and making them work. But for the most part, there's a reason why there's only one consumption lounge licensed in Michigan, and that is owned by Trucenta, a big entity. There is a reason why there are only a handful of micro businesses, and those are in municipalities, beyond rural, extreme rural places where there are no other options. The consumption event license was supposed to be the one that worked. And I've shared this before, that we grabbed that license with the only intention being to show strategic partners and potential investors that we had been vetted. We did not see the viability of this license. We were looking at retail like everybody else. We were looking at cultivation. We even looked at secure transport. But after doing all those pivots, we turned around and realized we had this, golden ticket in our hand, this event license, because it was post-COVID? Post-lockdown, folks were starting to come out. A lot of folks were flush with cash. Normative integration was on its path, and we needed to get out there and get the mindful, normalized public consumption to be a normal thing, and not this exotic, novel thing. But the CRA, and I credit the CRA with being one of the more progressive regulatory bodies amongst licensed regulated markets, because they had the wisdom to create this license. They had the wisdom to acknowledge that marijuana which is a term you'll never hear me use other than in this context, is a racial slur. And they went from the marijuana regulatory agency to the cannabis regulatory agency. So there's some progressivism there. But what they did not realize is they were keeping the event organizer license from becoming viable by creating such a huge insurance burden. And I did a couple of the large mega events last year, and the biggest hurdle is the insurance requirement. It cost me $10,000 for 1 day of coverage for an event. So, you're effectively starting at $10,000 in the hole. You got to sell $10,000 worth of tickets or sponsorship in order just to break even. And I did that twice.
That's before the venue cost and everything else.
Right. That's off the rip. We talk about the first rule of hole digging is if you're in the hole, stop digging. Right. So $10,000 and to a measly startup like us, that was a significant. We're doing our taxes now, and it's like it just jumps out. That $10,000 bill, just no matter how many times we look at it, it makes you gasp. So we effectively got chased. We couldn't afford to do that, particularly because these are outdoor events for the most part, and you're subject to the elements. The second time that I did that and spent that much money, we got completely rained out, washed out, monsoon, torrential rains, just, canopies didn't work, nothing. So we took losses. So from there, how we got up off the pavement was to look at the private space, which at that point was not regulated. There was a turn your head, look the other way policy because of the progressive individual consumption laws here in Michigan. You could do that. You could consume in your backyard. You can rent a private space. But we wanted to lean in. This is the only thing that we do. We're not jack of all trades, doing cultivation, trying to, multiple things. We are focused on the consumption event space with the championing the cause of mindful, normalized integration of cannabis. And we feel like we're on the end of the spectrum, not the smoke fest, not the music festival, but the fine dining, and not just fine dining, just dining, advancing that form factor.
And this is infused dining, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. Infused dining. And I got to stop and shout out Chef James. He is the newest. So the event was built to feature different chefs. So we had our first chef. I call it a 3-dinner deal. He got, and then he became a free agent. And we brought in another free agent. And this was his first. This is Chef James Phillips out of the Cleveland region, Seneca Kitchens. Just amazing. You talk about the intersectionality of food, science, and cannabis. I mean, this is some Walter White, Breaking Bad, forget the P2P cook. Here's the new way to do it, So just in awe of his capabilities. So this was dinner number 4, the Falling Leaves Infused Dinner Series. And with the goal of the dinner is not to just shove infused food down people's throats. It is obviously to introduce this new form factor and going beyond the gummies and brownies for folks who like edibles. These are 4 courses of fine dining, but it's also the networking component. And that is the component that really took off and really outpaced the dinner. The dinner ultimately became a complement to what we were doing. We were bringing folks into the room that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. So I've got the CEO of a brand sitting across from a social equity operator who just got licensed last week, or is just forming their LLC in an intimate setting.
And breaking bread and sharing cannabis. And
breaking bread, sharing cannabis, and occupying that space that has historically been the space where deals get done. Wars have been averted, borders moved, dynamic international events happen at the dinner table, the golf course, or the bar. And we wanted to be that connector for folks. So I'm just extremely proud.
I just want to stop you right there. I'm sorry. Yeah. And I know you're about to say you're proud, and you should be proud of the work you've been doing, but I just want to reemphasize what you just said, because to keep cannabis consumption into these either big, massive mega events or into these, even the speakeasy concept, right? Which I love the speakeasy concept. But to keep it there, it takes away what you just said right there, is that so many of, wars have been avoided, wars have been created, wars have been, whatever it may be, including the drug war, right? I'm sure that a lot
Right,
of the drug
right,
war
right, right, right,
came
right.
out of these kinds of settings and stuff.
Right.
But
Nixon and his cronies, they sat down at the,
they sat down, broke bread. I mean,
right.
breaking bread goes back thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's not some small thing. It's not just, oh, cool, it's some little fun thing to do. So what you're talking about is creating a space where that actually is encouraged and is 100% necessary in our industry, especially in the state of it in its nascency. So I just wanted to kind of just highlight that again and just
Yeah.
reemphasize that,
No,
because
important point, important point. I mean, and again, I'm not going to take credit. I wasn't this sage and, who had, this prophetic wisdom that I saw. I really was, we really were responding to the data. And, from the first time you
I'm
and
going
I
to say this though,
talked,
man, the most sage, wise people in the world are the ones that listen, the ones that look
right,
and listen to what
right,
others have to
right,
say.
right.
And so,
That is,
I'm not calling you sage or anything either necessarily. I'm saying that what you're doing is a little sage-like though, and the fact that you're listening, you got
I'll
to
take
listen.
sage
Yeah,
adjacent. I'll take
sage
sage adjacent
adjacent. There
right
you go.
now.
All right.
But no, listening. I can remember when you reached out to me about a year ago now and invited me to go out to University of Michigan to the Green Wolverines, the young professional cannabis group there on campus at U of M in Arbor, and just being able to appreciate sort of the business potential, and I left that panel with two things: feeling good about the future of cannabis because the folks who were coming behind me had a polished lens and were looking at things in the right way. And I got asked a question: what, somebody coming out of the gate, what would you be focused on right now? And I emphatically declared the data, the data, the data.
Yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
soon Walmart is going to be growing and selling cannabis.
And
And if
they're
they're
going to be
not
100% data driven.
right,
Absolutely.
and if it's not them, it'll be the avocado dynamic, where as soon as you opened up interstate commerce for that, then it becomes, Brazil and parts of South America that are producing so our flower. But the data, the ability to capture data, aggregate data, and activate data, is immeasurable, and it occurs in every scenario where cannabis. You talk about intersectionality. There's no greater intersectionality than cannabis and data. From someone lighting up a joint, pre-roll, taking a dab, to an event, there's data just falling like manna from the heavens, and the wise people are the ones who are going to continue to execute in their discipline, but are also going to stop to collect that data. So we were all about data, up and down our individual supply chain, because we fashion ourselves as a vertically integrated event company. Like we do it all. We don't rely on Eventbrite. We have our own ticketing platform.
Okay.
We're not growing.
So I want to definitely hear more about this at some point, but there's some other things I definitely want to ask you today here too. And so shifting gears a little bit here, something that I think is, that I've been really wanting to bring to this show is something that you bring to a lot of things you do. So something I appreciate early on, was your intentionality, right? And everything you're talking about right here, you can tell, at least I believe that our audience can tell here the intentionality behind everything, right? And it's not just the intentionality, it's the understanding of how the brain works. So for me personally, right, I studied the brain several times in my life, right? Not the college level, but probably actually more advanced than what you get at a lot of the college level, to be quite frank. But from the time I was a kid, right? And I think that learning about the brain was something that really influenced and impacted my trajectory and my growth. When we connected on the Power Hour a couple of years ago by now,
remember that
one of the things that really stuck out to me was you had one of the more codified understandings of how to take the understanding of the brain as an entrepreneur into a whole nother level. So I'd love for you to just share even just a little bit of kind of some of your findings and understandings and how you do this. Yeah.
I remember that conversation, Mike, and it was, I think you had thrown a question out to the group about our struggles and our challenges and how are people dealing with them. And my response was, it was part and parcel of the process, and one that I wasn't going to deny myself. And I was actually leaned in and experiencing the trials and the tribulations are part of the process, particularly part of the growth process. So my fascination with the brain is like yours. It's, understanding our avatar, understanding, the ship or the vehicle that we've been giving, our spirits have been given to traverse this world. We really need to focus on the brain. And the brain is such a dynamic part of our anatomy, one that we look at through, really, most people look at it, with tunnel vision and don't appreciate the capacity of their brain. We only use about 10% of our brain, and we're behind certain animals in the food chain that use more of their brain. But the ability to activate your brain as a tool, not just to run your body, not just to keep organs functioning and sending signals to the rest of the body, but actually to inform your existence. So my fascination started with neuroplasticity, the idea that you could, change, even if you have been steeped in trauma for, like those of us who are victims of the war on drugs, you could still rewire your brain, and you're never too old to change those, create new neural pathways and resurrect former ones, that you could do that. And all of the power resides within. My fascination then moved on to the solar plexus, which a lot of folks don't know about. Really is your second brain. When you talk about your gut instinct, your gut feeling, and you point to your midsection, your abdomen, that's your solar plexus. There are more neural connections there than in your brain. So when you feel something, you call it your instinct, you call it your sixth sense or whatever. That is really real neurons in your body working to send you a message. So a lot of people feel it in their gut before they, put two and two together. So
I'm going to throw something in here real quick, actually.
Yeah.
So you bring up the solar plexus. I studied martial arts a lot as a young person and into my 20s and 30s. And we there's two areas, really three, that we protect the groin, of course, but the other two areas we protect are the brain up here and the solar plexus. And the places that we attack are the brain, the head, and the solar plexus. So much goes right to the solar plexus. So I love that you're bringing this up and tying it together.
You see people get knocked out from a body blow. That's getting hit in that section with blunt force. And the same way, if you get hit in your head, you'll concuss. You can concuss, so to speak, in your solar plexus. So great point. A lot of folks just don't.
So you have two methods. One that I definitely would love to hear. You have a method that you play tapes in the evening, right?
Yes.
Right.
So
tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So mindful meditation, guided meditation. I'm just not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough to really quiet my body. I can quiet my breathing, but to really block out the noise, I can get there. But then how do you start downloading the positive messages, the affirmation? And most of us, when we are starting to fall asleep, we slip into a theta state, which is really a hypnotic state where whatever you're fed, sort of bypasses your logic, your reasoning, your other filters, and goes right to the core of the brain and gets implemented. So every night, I slap on the AirPods and my guided meditation of choice, I fall asleep to. So I'm out in 3 seconds, but it's 33 minutes of messaging. Now, I'm thankful that it's not bad messaging, because it could turn me into a psychopath. But obviously, you want to be discerning about what you subject yourself to, particularly in a theta state. But it works wonders. It truly works. The ability, but the breathing, this is enough a topic that we could spend 3 or 4 podcasts on. But the breathing is equally important. If you look at the neuroplasticity and the ability to activate the brain in that way, the bridge to it is the breathing. You have to practice controlled, meditative, deliberate breathing in order to get to that state. So that's part of the equation too. It's not just plug in the earpods and start listening. It's really getting into a state where we can absorb it. But it has been transformational for me, to the point where, I do try to share it. And it is part of what I preach, particularly to young entrepreneurs. Like, you can't, there are so many things you can't control, but there are some things that you can control. And what you can control,
absolutely control what you put in your own brain, especially as you go into sleep, when it's you and your pillow, basically, at that point in time. So
that's it.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. And to me, this stuff is so crucial, because it's not, we talk all the time as entrepreneurs about all the techniques and the strategies and the hacks. But at the end of the day, these are the hacks, right? The things that are, it's not about like, whether or not you like this on social or you post this at a certain time of the day. Yes, those things do matter, but it's also about how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your best instruments, your best tools, which is your own brain, your own health, your own wellness. So we're going to take a break here and go get a word from whoever it is that Vince has lined up to do a word from today. And then we're going to come back and do our game. I'm really curious. I know you beforehand. You were like, you were talking. You're like, hey, you're gonna nail these questions. So
we're gonna see if you've been stumping a lot of folks. I want to represent. So
all right, here we go. So we'll be right back with our game. And I think Canned Question was the best name that went in the chat. I can't remember who said it, but Canned Question somebody put out there. That's much better than Quick Question. So we're gonna run with Canned Question for now until somebody else comes with a better name potentially. But like that. And we got to find out who that was and give them credit. So Canned Question. We'll be right back with Canned Question and Michael Webster.
Well, here at the National Cannabis Industry Association, we have proudly represented small businesses across the cannabis industry since 2010. We represent Main Street cannabis, not Wall Street cannabis. We have come so far in this fight to legalize cannabis that it seems that it's almost inevitable, and we're the ones making sure that as those rules are written, they favor small businesses, mom and pop operators, and Main Street cannabis, not Wall Street cannabis. In addition to making sure that your voice is heard at the federal level, being a member of NCIA also means building a vibrant community of small business owners within the cannabis space. Because we can always learn so much better by working together, learning from our mistakes and our successes, and building this industry together. So if you're interested in making sure that small businesses and Main Street cannabis has a seat at the table, be sure to join NCIA at thecannabisindustry.org.
All right. So yeah, look, I mean, amazing conversation always with Michael Webster. I just, we could have talked probably for 3 hours today, not even missed a beat. I hope that everybody here has enjoyed the conversation today. I think that it's, aside from the news bits that we went over today, aside from learning about falling leaves, I really want to harp in on the fact that the last bit that we just talked about and taking care of your brain and being really intentional in how you develop your brain and rewire your brain. And yes, it is rewiring our brains, right? Because even if we grow up in ways that, we're conscious and so on and so forth, we're still in this constant onslaught of negativity in our culture. And it's not just the things we think are negative, right? It's things that are designed by people that have been designing programming of the brain for literally decades now and downloading it right into us to make us think a certain way and feel a certain way and behave and act a certain way. So anyway, with that said, we're going to jump now into Canned Question. So we got 2 questions, it looks like, for you here today. And these questions are provided, of course, by our awesome show producer. I want to give a shout out to Vince Chandler, who makes all this magic happen now, 4 seasons running for the Cannabis Minority Report. And just Vince is just awesome to work with. So
I call him Oz.
Oz, there you go. The man behind the curtain. Yeah, exactly. All right. So we all know the DC's unregulated legal market, Washington, D.C., the unregulated legal market has created its own odd rules. Here's one that's wildly weird. If you sell cannabis in our nation's capital, what else can you legally not sell? Is it computers, cell phones, cars, or DVDs? Which can you not sell? If you sell cannabis in our nation's capital, which of these can you not legally sell? Computers, cell phones, cars, or DVDs?
I mean, with the disclaimer that I have no clue, I'm just going to, follow my own train.
Just spit it out. What is it?
Cars.
A registration application for a cultivation center or dispensary shall not be approved for any outlet, property, establishment, or business that sells motor vehicle gasoline or that holds a motor vehicle sales, service, and repair endorsement. So you got it, man. Yep, 1 out of 4 chance, and you nailed it. Right. No, but you got it. That's all that matters, right?
Yeah,
you got
it. No, I mean, to me, that's
process elimination, right?
That's a little bit intuitive of the choices, but
I'll take your solar plexus, man. Yeah, you leaning into your solar plexus.
I listen to the
you
solar
got that thing tuned. Absolutely. This is why. I mean, look, we talk tritely, but this is why it's important. But when we clear out all the noise, we actually, as individuals, as human beings, we are tuned to the nature around us, to the energies around us. And it's a real thing. I mean, they've made movies and written books and poems and songs about this for thousands of years. It's not some random thing that, they try to teach us and tell us that it's some bullshit. Excuse my language, but this stuff's real. So let's see if you can get the next one here. Let's see if the solar plexus will guide you to the next one, or maybe it'll be your brain. In 2022, which state legislature accidentally legalized cannabis edibles? So in 2022, which state legislator accidentally legalized cannabis edibles? Vince, I don't know where you come up with these questions, but I love you, man. Michigan, Minnesota, Maine, or Massachusetts? Michigan, Minnesota, Maine, or Massachusetts?
All right, so I can use a little process of elimination here. I know it wasn't accidental in Michigan. It was not accidental in Massachusetts. I'm going to go with Minnesota.
After an amendment passed unanimously during a legislative session in Minnesota in May 2023, State Senator Abler, I don't know how to say his name, said that doesn't legalize marijuana. We just didn't do that, did we? So, and yet they did. So, yeah, thank you, Minnesota, for being very, progressive, I guess you could say.
For a minute.
But yeah, Michael Webster going with that was a little bit of both, right? It was a little bit of the brain up here and the solar plexus brain down here. So good job, man. No, look, this was a great conversation, man.
Heavy as the head that wears the crown.
There you go. There you go. Right, exactly. So we're gonna have to make a can of question crown to hand out to our guests here that get both questions, go 2 for 2. Bring you all back at the end of the year for for face off.
For the lightning
exactly. The Jeopardy style or something like that. So I've actually been watching these old game shows with my mom the last few weeks. She runs these old game shows every now and again. I've seen stuff like I saw Alex Trebek doing some game that wasn't Jeopardy, and I was like, wow, I remember this when I was a kid, and I totally forgot that it was Alex Trebek. So it's a trip when you watch old programs when you were a kid and forgot about the things that you didn't realize. But look, so this was a great conversation, and
amazing.
Are there any last thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with today before we head out?
I always want to end on a positive note, but I think that there are some opportunities. Sometimes something that can be couched in, what we perceived as negativity can actually be a positive thing. But I just want to take a moment and, what did Kanye say? Salute to the dirt bags and all the scumbags and our industry. We need to clean up our markets. I think we have matured enough, some of us, our markets, that we can start turning a little bit of attention to cleaning house and cleaning up, doing some spring cleaning. There are some folks in our midst operating under social equity banners, aligning themselves. It's this fractional dynamic, Mike. It's this fractional CMO, fractional CEO. These folks who come along, attach themselves to companies, not necessarily committed to the value alignment, and are doing side deals, side hustles under the umbrella of, the good brand, the good entity, the good actor. And I'm pretty disgusted with it. So in a subtle way and backhanded way, those folks know who they are. I want to call them out.
And, I'm gonna just to piggyback off of that, I'll say real briefly here. It's not to say that a fractional CMO or CFO is a bad thing. It's to say that there's a lot of people that are using that template, that are using that format. Absolutely, no, that are using this format to basically be able to get themselves a little piece of a company into a company, and kind of see behind the curtain, learn a little bit of the magic, take that and apply it to one of their other companies that they're a little bit more invested in. And these are things that we have to be careful of. So when you're a social equity company,
fractional C-suite folks are all good with me. We need them in a nascent industry like this. We need them, but it's the ones who are operating unscrupulously and without integrity that need to be called out. So, but other than that, I love cannabis. Cannabis is an amazing plant, an amazing. I'll end with my real end will be with fugitive trichomes. That's my concept. I might have mentioned it before, but fugitive trichomes. If cannabis were never outlawed and were allowed to proliferate naturally, you'd have airborne trichomes that we'd be breathing in, fugitive trichomes, and our society would be a much healthier one as a result. So
I'm going to throw a little shout out here to Corey Horton. has an invention called the Jackrabbit,
Yes.
And other things that he's actually been creating, which maybe are a little different than what you're talking about. But this is a man who understands
the integrity of the trichome.
Exactly, understands to protect the integrity of the trichome. So
right,
shout
mechanical
out to Corey
separation. And Corey's an amazing brother. Please check in for the Jackrabbit. Find him on LinkedIn. Connect with him. Amazing product, amazing concept. The forethought that it would take to be out there day in and day out, not budging, not giving in, championing this cause of mechanical trichome separation in a way that does not undermine the integrity. True cannabis patriot, and my man.
Absolutely. So, Michael, really appreciate you, man. Looking forward to all the conversations we're going to have in the future. And this was great, man. So with that said,
it's like loved ones. It's like loved ones, Mike. We don't need to say all the words that, it is what it is. It is what it is.
What we do need to say, though, is bye to everybody and have a wonderful week. Have an awesome Monday. Have a great everything between now and the next time we talk. Remember, we do this live every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, you can find and subscribe to us on all the different platforms. I should say real quickly here, we also are accepting still sponsorships as part of our Lobby Days DEI delegation. If that's something you're interested in seeing, which is basically like more equitable lobbying in DC from this industry, making sure the right people are in the room advocating. We have some amazing people that are great leaders in this space. Then go ahead and, get your company to throw down if you are the company's owner, whatever it may be. And a little bit goes a long way. So just reach out to us and let us know. So everybody have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Vince.
The Cannabis Minority Report is a production of the National Cannabis Industry Association. Hosted by Mike Lomuto, directed by Vince Chandler. Our producers are Bethany Moore and Aaron Smith, and our executive producers are Vince Chandler and Mike Lomuto.